Okay. All right, we have verified with MPO staff that we have a quorum, so we will now call the meeting of the Waco MPO Policy Board of March 21st, 2024 to order at 1:32 p.m. MPO staff, has this meeting been posted?
Yes.
And we will also call into session the Waco City Council. We've got 3 of us here, which is a quorum. And we will now proceed with our public hearing. Do we have any registered speakers?
No.
Okay. Would anyone here like to speak? Okay. Since there are no registered speakers, we'll move to agenda item number 3 and consider approval of the minutes of the February 15th, 2024 MPO Policy Board meeting. A copy of the minutes was provided in your meeting packet. Are there any corrections to the minutes as submitted? All right, hearing none, the minutes are approved as presented. We will now move to review, discussion, and action regarding directing MPO staff to solicit public comments concerning the draft 2025 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program, aka the TIP, of the Waco MPO. Dr. Kumar.
Thank you. So we are in the process of developing the 2025-2028 Transportation Improvement Program. And as we have mentioned several times before, that this document is the culmination of the movement from the actual plan into the program so that it can start getting into the implementation phase. And so what we typically do in this case is that we typically develop the TIP slightly later in the year. However, this year, based on the text out requests, we have brought it forward a little bit earlier. And so what we do in each of these documents, we update it every 2 years. However, this lists all the regionally significant projects for which we have a realistic chance for funding over the next 4 years. And these are all the projects that are required to have been identified explicitly into our long-range metropolitan transportation plan. These are also projects which must be completely designed, environmentally cleared, as well as any right-of-way acquisition that is needed, they must be completed. And simultaneously, it has to show that there are committed federal or state funds for it. We typically do it every 2 years, and every 2 years, as well as whenever we do amend it, we typically do them once a year. We invite public to provide their input on all the projects. And in today's meeting, we are requesting you to give us the go-ahead to schedule that public meeting. Next slide. Just a very brief, rough content of what is going in there is that these are the projects, 4 of the major ones, which are programmed for construction. And at this point in time, I-35-4C, it's more than likely it's going to be let for FY 2025. State Highway 6 Twin Bridges project for FY 2025 as well. Spur 298 for FY 2026, as well as State Highway 6 at McLaughlin for FY 2027. At this point in time, we will remove State Highway 31 since it is going to be let in FY 2024 itself. Next slide. These are the projects that are going to be listed as programmed for preliminary design and engineering, as well as right-of-way acquisition. And these are all the projects in which the anticipated funding at this point in time is for 2029 or beyond. So it falls outside our TIP time frame. So these are Loop 340 all the way from US 84 to State Road 484, US 84 from Hewitt Drive to Spur 298, the Potts Interchange, the McGregor Bypass, all 3 of those projects on US 84, US 317 between Blue Bonnet and Mother Neff Parkway, as well as University Parks Drive. So these are the projects for which we are in the process of preliminary design and engineering, and we are expecting to find funding for it beyond the 2029. So next slide, please. So right now, what we are requesting you to do is to give us the permission to go ahead with the solicitation of public comment between April 1 and April 30th. We would like to hold the public information meeting on April 1, both at 12 o'clock and 5:30 p.m. And we will bring the recommendation and the review of the TAC on the May 2nd meeting. We'll review the draft at that meeting, we'll review the draft of the TIP and the comments received. And at that meeting, we will consider expect the TAC to make the recommendation for consideration at the policy board, and we are then will be requesting you on the May 16th meeting to conduct a public hearing and adopt it. So for today's action item, we just need your direction. So it's a directive action item. You're not taking a formal vote, and simple yea nay will be sufficient. We just want you to give us the go-ahead to schedule the public meetings for the next day.
Any questions or discussion on the proposed public engagement schedule, public comment period, any of that?
The public comment is both in person and with a virtual opportunity, right?
Yes. How many people do we have online?
Just one.
Just one. Probably don't.
All right. Given that we're not taking a formal vote, just kind of a head nod. All in favor, either say aye or raise your right hand, or do both. Aye. All opposed, nay, or raise your right hand. All right. Sounds like we have our direction on that. And so now we go to the 2050 MTP project evaluation framework, timeline, and action. Dr. Kumar.
Thank you. That's good. So the most important point, and this is, I want to make sure that this particular point we all are very comfortable with, because this is the first time policy board is actually adopting a call for proposal framework. Previously we have been using planning factors that are required by the Federal Highway Administration, and our MTP project evaluation criteria is listed in our appendix. But this is the first time we are formally discussing it in public meeting, as well as we are requesting you to formally adopt this as part of our MTP call proposal process. So the most important motivation behind this is really the regional vision statement that you all developed earlier in the year in October. And this is what the regional vision statement, so we use this as a guiding factor in which we made sure that every element of this regional vision statement was directly reflected into our MTP call for proposal and the evaluation criteria. We wanted to make sure that this regional vision is the policy board's vision for the region, and our evaluation criteria must reflect it absolutely to the highest extent possible. So we feel pretty comfortable that everything that is highlighted in this, those are all the items that we made sure was its own category in the evaluation criteria, so that we reflect the regional vision as perfectly as possible. So next slide, please. And this is very consistent with the idea that MPO policy board is responsible for envisioning McLennan County's transportation future, and we have to move the region toward that shared regional vision. And our motivation obviously is that if we best way, we typically do a lot of predictive modeling for what the travel demand models are going to look like, but really at the end of the day, what Lincoln said still holds true just as much as it did then, that the best way to predict it to make it, rather than trying to guess what it's going to look like. So that's our goal. So based on the regional vision, that's what we did. The other very important part that we wanted to make sure that it's reflected is the federal requirement of the 3C process. And I do want to discuss a little bit deeply, because what is going to happen with this is that these three criteria, we have been doing it. It's not so much we have not been doing it, but there is often a formal structure and institutional arrangement. And that's what we're introducing with this round of call for proposal. And so comprehensive typically means that we pay attention to all the different modes of transportation. But I want to bring your attention to continuing and cooperative, and why that is so important. In the last 2 years, at least, this is one of the items that has been discussed several times, and we're going to speak very frankly here, that quite often, there's projects that, and that may be of high desire from one group of people. They may often think that, their project is not getting funded while somebody else's project is getting funded. And many times there has also been some amount of gap, which is very typical among different sponsors of the project or different people who are involved with the project. And so one of the things we want to do with this continuing portion of the 3C process is to make sure that all the entities that are responsible for a project are in regular communication with each other about the development of the project, the design of the project. We often hear these items sometimes that, why am I hearing about this at the 90% completion of the design? Well, the reality is that we have been talking about these projects for entire 4 or 5 years. And so it's never something new that jumps up. But what we have not had in the past is a formal institutional mechanism to make sure that these communications are taken care of. Cooperative, similarly, is also very important because quite often it shouldn't be 1 or 2 entities that are supporting a particular project. We are hoping that these are transportation projects that are going to have impact throughout McLennan County, regardless of which jurisdiction they typically fall under. We don't have any of the text dot right of way or federal highway administration right of way where not the entire county travels on it on a regular basis. And so what we want to do is that make sure that that cooperation occurs all the way from the conception of the project, all the way to when it gets into the tip and it is ready to be implemented. So one of the items that we wanted to share with you that we have been contemplating, next slide please, is that once the projects get to get included in the MTP, one of the formal arrangements we want to make is that make sure that there is a reporting to the technical advisory committee at the 30%, 60%, 90% of the readiness of the project level. Because the idea is that by simply leaving the project to be developed by one group of people and without any input from any other group of people, quite often we're all very busy and we often tend to let someone else, hold it up to the point, and then we will worry about it when it comes time to make final decisions. And typically that has had some poor consequences and poor results. Sometimes we have had to go back after the 90% completion of design engineering to go back and revise the project. So one of the institutional check that we want to institute here is to make sure that at every 30%, 60%, and 90% point, there is a reporting from the sponsoring entities of the project to the TAC so that not only they can get feedback, but also be able to make any changes as possible and not wait all the way until 90% design engineering is complete. So the next slide, please. So in this case, the framework that you have in front of you is what we have developed so far with input from the MTP steering committee, but I would like to in fact go even far back. Even before the MTP steering committee, we had the early thinkers who spent almost 6 months trying to figure out what the approach and the scope of this framework is going to be. And they spent numerous hours trying to debate and argue how we needed to approach this. And then MTP steering committee has helped us to this point so that we actually have an instrument. And then technical advisory committee has had input, so have you. And based on that, we developed 10 different categories, which are in alignment with the vision statement, also based on required federal planning factors that by law we have to respond to. And also at the last IIJA, there was a planning emphasis area that we want to make sure is adequately represented. So these are the next, these are the 10 different sections that you have seen in non-motorized path elements. I'm not going to read through all of this because each one of you have had a chance to review them at different points in time. We had emailed the draft instrument, and you are waiting. Actually, these are the 10 criteria that you are waiting, and several of you have already completed. So thank you for doing that. This is really fabulous. And so,
Dr. Kumar, on that real quickly, I think more than half of the 40 that were sent out, these criteria for waiting, have completed it. When is the deadline to get those in based on the emails that have gone out for everyone? Just as an encouragement, if you haven't had a chance.
So all of you who have not completed, please complete them by Monday so that we can compile them together and so that we can email you the final weighting before we ask you to vote on it. Because at the next meeting, you will be voting on the final weights. And I think several of you have completed, so I'm
Is this a decision?
Yes.
Emails?
Yes.
And some of you may have clicked and the registration link had expired, so they sent out new registration links to that at least should be good for a few days.
It will be good at least till Monday for sure.
Okay.
Yes.
But today is not the day where we as a group are weighting these. That's for the next meeting. Today is about kind of just looking at this form and these categories just in general for approval or review. Is that right? Okay. Go ahead.
You want me to go ahead? So, I want to give you a little more background on this and how is this also going to play out. So after these 10 categories, what the way it's going to play out over the next several years, actually, is that we have drafted this framework, and you will finish the evaluation criteria and make a decision at the next meeting. Call for proposal is going to get completed by June, and the projects are going to, a draft listing of the project in the MTP in a single prioritized list will occur in June, at which point in time you will give us the go-ahead to organize public meetings, and then we'll bring it back to you along with public meeting comments and input at the October meeting, at which you will give us the go-ahead with the final listing of the project. And by that point in time, we'll also be close enough to finalize the draft of the MTP, and the final deadline for you to adopt the next MTP will be January of 2025. And so after January 2025, we expect this process to again begin the prioritized list. TxDOT district typically begins to look at that at prioritized list and begins the planning specification estimate as well as design engineering process in the same order of priorities. And with the sponsoring agencies, they will start getting some of these projects ready. We'll start identifying the funding, and whenever realistic funding opportunities present themselves, some of these projects start moving into the tip. That's typically what the process is going to look like. So a few quick timelines we wanted to go over. So March 25th, that's Monday, that's when we would like to open the call for proposal. And we have organized a first workshop. We are anticipating that most of you here in this room will not actually be developing a particular proposal. The people, your respective representatives on the TAC are actually the people who are going to be developing proposals. So we wanted to do a workshop on April 4th to make sure that people knew how to address this. Most of the input is going to be in decision lens. And so we want to spend significant amount of time trying to make sure that people who are actually going to be making the proposal with advice and direction from you are very familiar with technically what is going to play out. The final category in the waiting approval will be at the April 18th meeting of the policy board. At the May 2nd, we'll hold another workshop. Hopefully by that point in time, some of the people would have started entering, and whatever help they need at that point in time, that's what that workshop is going to be. Call for proposal will close on June 21st. We'll spend the month of July at proposal for the evaluation period. That's when we'll complete the evaluation and present the final evaluation and the weights for all the projects, the scoring for projects to you in the prioritized form. So very quickly, what I wanted to mention is that we have so we had invited a total of 40 people, everyone on the policy board, everyone on the technical advisory committee, everyone on the MTP steering committee, and a representative from the 2 active work groups we have. And that added up to 40. Out of 40, we have 24 of you who have completed the weighting. And that translates to roughly about 11% margin of error. If just two more of you completed it, we'll get it down to below 10%, which will be like fantastic. So that's where we are. And what we wanted to see is if there was any further input and anything you want us to change. There are a few things that are happening as we speak. So compared to the last emailed version of the draft, we learned that there are a bunch of boxes which are impossible to fit all that information. So we have revised them to make better boxes and such. And so there are only 2 items left in this. One is the actual weights that will be assigned to each of the categories, as well as the final formatting of the document itself. And so pending that, we're ready to make any revision that you'd like us. Otherwise, we're going to request you to adopt this as your call for proposal framework.
And these individual kind of criteria that we were asked separately to be weighted are somewhat explained in each kind of section here, beginning with section 1, section 2, in terms of what it means. For example, conflict point reduction would be like where there are crashes happening a lot at this point, right? So like if you're looking for what some of these mean, if you haven't had a chance to look that up, this document should give you an explanation of what each term of these 1 to 10. Any questions or comments or observations?
So we talked about this last month. I'm going to verify that we're laying on the weighting. This will be an objective way to prioritize projects. But the policy board, well, technical advisory committee and policy board will still have an opportunity if there's some other factors that push a project to a higher priority or lower priority. We're not bound or constrained by the scaling that occurs. Is that accurate?
So let me add two things. One is that you are accurate in overall what you're saying. One of the things that I would add is that you'd notice that we have hesitated in using the word objective at any point in time, primarily because what we are expecting is that even when we assign numbers, which gives the appearance of objective, we recognize that there is a lot of qualitative element that goes in. And so when you look at this in each section, the very last item says that describe anything that is not addressed above. That's purely qualitative. In fact, we just want people to use their imagination, use their thing, because we don't anticipate that we know exactly what the answers are going to be. Several of the people, not only people on the TAC, but most of the people on the TAC also have a large number of staff working for them who can also come up with many different ideas so they can fill them up wherever they don't fit. So that's one where we're not necessarily calling it objective. It will look like we will still have overall 100 points. Each project will get a scoring, and that's what we'll present in the draft form to both TAC and the policy board. The final decision of what the final order of the projects look like is absolutely policy board's decision. And the tech and at least it's not a problem. We would like you to consider the prioritized list, but the final priority of the project is entirely your decision. You can choose to move any project anywhere you like. That's your decision. That's your call.
But by establishing kind of this framework, it gives some coherence as to why the TAC may push forward to us certain projects over others, right? Like this along, not objective, but maybe along more quantitative and qualitative lines, that there's some more coherence to the process based on our values expressed in the way. Is that a way to say it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the only thing I would add to that is, so we obviously don't want to choose projects randomly.
Right.
We want to choose projects that are reasonable. We have considered them for their value, and we have considered them for their worth. We have considered them for the benefit they bring to the area. And we want to be explicit and transparent about it. Why are we choosing the projects that we want to choose? Because in many ways, this whole idea of, in fact, one of the important points that I want to make sure that we're all comfortable with is that the last MTP has several projects that were ranked very highly based on a slightly different criteria. In our staff estimate, we don't anticipate our final project criteria, prioritized list to look all that different from what is here. What we're really motivated by is this idea that this will force the cities, the tech staff, the public, the staff to engage in the process all the way from the idea of the project to actual delivery of the project at every stage. And the final outcome that we're really after here is that we get the best project possible. Will we ever get the perfect project? There is no such thing. And I think most of you here in this room know that. But what we want to guarantee is that given all the constraints and the limitations we have, within that, we want to be able to deliver absolutely the best project possible.
And the check-in points are designed so that the planning process, as it's in engineering and design, doesn't get too far out of whack with the MPO policy board's conception for this project. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Has any consideration based upon the TAC is going to be evaluating these and reviewing them, making recommendations to the policy board, looking at the framework of this, has there been given any more or any thought to making this total form kind of a fillable form?
So thank you. So what we'll do is that all the intake is going to be in decision lens, and in just a moment, I have a few slides to show what would it look like. Although it's going to be a little more important for the TAC than it is for you, because you will not be facing that. But all the project intake is going to be in decision lens itself. So people can go, and if they are fillable, they can go in and fill out all the project information in there. We will also make it optional for people to by email submit large files or documents to share, because if some projects are already too far ahead, they're conceptual drawings that can't be put in there and they need to be considered and evaluated, then we'll also have the option of emailing it, then the staff can compile it into project evaluation for the evaluation team. And also, just wanted to add that evaluation team, we are expecting it to be largely composed of members from TAC, but that also is your prerogative. You decide who all are going to be on the evaluation team.
So kind of, Bo, to your point, I mean, at some point, there's the submission of proposals, and that may come from one of our entities, right? And that, would that go through Decision Lens, the kind of the upload or the intake?
Yes.
And then the review by the TAC or the committee, the evaluating committee, also occurs through Decision. They're looking at that on the back end of, okay.
So that's why Decision Lens is a really nice platform in which we can consolidate all of it in a single location rather than having to work on a bunch of different emails for different files. And stuff.
Well, and if you look at the framework, from my perspective, you know, if you look at the framework, trying to check all the boxes so that you can get as many points as you can possibly get for a project, it's a pretty cumbersome process to go through to achieve that. And what I was thinking of was the ease for folks to be able to submit as opposed to dropping you a stack of paperwork about this deep is kind of what I was getting.
So at this point in time, based on some very dry run that we have been able to see, we don't expect it to be terribly cumbersome, but we also do not expect it to be something that someone can do in a couple of weeks. So we have been somewhat deliberate about it, that we don't want it, someone to make a proposal without having given it thought. But we also don't want to make it so cumbersome that it becomes.
And it discourages proposals.
Exactly.
Correct. Thank you.
So like, let's say, and this would never happen, of course, but that a policy board member lives on a street that, and wants that street to have federal funds to upgrade, not a street, but a road. And, goes through real quick, fills this out. This goes to TAC and it's like, oh, this isn't sponsored by another entity. It doesn't meet many of these achieving goals. This was someone's pet project. They really had a very vested personal interest in. What's the likelihood of that then, when it's scored at like a 5 or a 10 or something out of 100, what's the likelihood of that reaching us? Like a poorly filled out, not hitting many of the boxes, will that get kind of like shut down at TAC?
Yeah, so we will consider every project that comes in. So that goes with us, we will not reject any project from consideration. What we have to do is that even our MTP, long range plan, has to be fiscally constrained. And that fiscal constraint puts a cutoff point for all the projects. Because every project needs a cost estimate, a reasonable cost estimate. So at the very minimum, that will be the cutoff point. If something cannot be funded within the fiscal constraint that we develop for this, that will get out of the list. However, within that list, we will present to you all the prioritized lists based on the ranking. And then you will choose which ones to include, and if any of these projects need to be excluded. But from the staff point of view, what we will do is that we will simply use the fiscal constraint projection, and that will be the cutoff point. All the projects that can fit will bring to your consideration. All the projects that are outside of that fiscal constraint will not get.
But if within the fiscal constraints, we may very well see projects that score 99 and those that score 5.
If it can be fit, yes.
Okay. It might not have been a helpful illustration, but I was just thinking about kind of lesser projects or projects not as likely to succeed in this.
You will see if something is a 5 point.
Okay.
Yes.
This may be a really dumb question, but for those of us that are part of like a city traffic organization, what would be the best route if we are thinking of a project that could be constructed for Waco to get it to a point that it's not going to guarantee 8 to 5, but just go down.
So each member entity has a technical advisory committee member, and that person would be the best starting point. And so, so for instance, since the City of Waco, we have 3 members on the TAC. Amy serves as the TAC chair, and we also have Laura Wagstaff and Rachel. While you're going through the weighting criteria, one of the things that I did want to share with you that I know that some of you have, all of you have preferences, and there are variations in the preferences about, what you value more than something else. The way the decision-making, decision lens criteria system works, it's a model called multi-criteria decision-making process, and by which our goal is to really have you reveal the preferences rather than simply have a ranked order list. And so that's one reason why you would notice that when the final weights will come up, you'll notice that most of the weights are going to vary somewhere within a relatively small margin. And so you're not going to see that one of the sections has 60 points. It will not happen that way. It will, in fact, and that's why the pairwise comparison sort of forces you to think about all of these sections in relation to each other. And what will end up happening, most likely you'll end up with some weight between 5 to 15. So imagine the 10 was the default, the starting point. So had you weighted all of them identically, then your final weight would have been 10 for each of these sections. But if you weight some more highly than the other, it will end up moving it in that direction. And so more than likely, so based on the 44, I can tell you that there are 3 of these sections that are close to 15 in their weights, and then there are other 3 sections that are close to 5 in their weights, and the rest of them are right in the middle. And so, which is sort of exactly what.
But you have to come to the next meeting to find out which of those are. That's a little teaser. We don't have the highway construction today, so we're going to leave you with a little cliffhanger. So
Just, like you said, I filled it out this morning, and actually I able to do it in about 10 minutes. So.
Wonderful.
The second one really.
Yeah, I think, Craig, you were probably one of the first ones to complete it from the MTP steering committee.
Yeah, it was early on. I think the day after that meeting, we talked about it. It didn't take that long. It took when you first started, it takes a couple of minutes to get figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
Keep going and keep moving.
I agree with that.
It worked pretty well. So,
Yes.
So today, Dr. Kumar, what you're seeking from us is direction to proceed with this criteria, and which will relate to the next agenda item, which is kind of opening it up, but using this, but then at our next meeting, we will either approve or modify kind of the weighted responses. Is that kind of where we are here?
And by next meeting, we'll also have a completely formatted so that the boxes will be exactly sized, and the numberings and any possible typo, all that will be completely cleaned up. We will not make any changes to this instrument whatsoever after the next meeting.
Any other questions, observations, comments? And this doesn't need a formal vote, just all in favor of giving MPO staff direction to proceed with this criteria, the project proposal application laid out. Just raise your right hand or say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. You have the direction you need?
Thank you.
All right, let's move to the next agenda item, which is review, discussion, and action regarding directing MPO staff to open the call for proposals for the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan of the Waco MPO.
And so in terms of date, very quickly, we would like to begin at next Monday. But what we want to do is that we want to start the intake of the proposal process using decision lens. And so we'll do these 2 workshops at the TAC meeting. But one of the things that we do want to get your thoughts on, we didn't think that you would want to spend your time in a workshop where we want to go into great amount of detail about each of the criteria. What do they mean? What does it mean for the project to be on a straw net versus the evacuation route? We didn't want you we didn't want to bore you on some of those items, but that's what the workshop we will do with the TAC at the minimum twice. We'll also do a workshop with the evaluation team, because evaluation team will also need some amount of direction about how to evaluate these and assign numbers to them. And the final scores are going to be weighted according to the results that you come up with from the weighting exercise and adopt at the next meeting. Next slide. This is, even though you can't read, this is sort of like what people who are submitting the project, this is what they will be looking at. So it has all these different criteria with boxes, and each boxes can be filled in directly what it is. Each city can also collaborate. So for instance, in fact, more likely scenario is going to look like this. Let's suppose that the city X wants a particular project done. Most likely this project is on a TxDOT or a federal highway right of way. So they would in fact like to propose this project as a joint sponsor at the minimum between the city and TxDOT. So they would probably want certain amount of input from TxDOT as well, so they can collaborate on what the project concept is going to look like with the TxDOT. So in most of your cases, it will be Victor and his group that you'll be working with his group. So you can assign Victor as a co-sponsor, and then he can start, you can communicate in Decision Lens itself about, oh, we want this to be written in this form. You can revise, connect. And so this sort of becomes the workspace whereby we're revising and commenting with each other. We will not see, the staff will not see any of that comment. That will be between the sponsoring entities. And you can also print and share it. So it becomes a really useful platform to collaborate with each other in the project submission. Again, for the policy board, this may be irrelevant, but the members in the TAC, this is the screen they will be looking at. Any question or about the timeline or the format?
So it would open on March 25th and it would close on June 21st. So roughly 3-month timeline there. Okay, sounds like, do we need a kind of informal policy board direction to proceed?
Yeah, by opening the call.
Okay. Please indicate by extended right hand if you're in favor of opening the call for proposal along those lines. Anyone opposed by same sign? All right, have your direction. And we will move now to agenda item number 7, update and discussion on current grant efforts.
So the FY 2022 SS4A grant that is well underway. We are on track to complete it by May. The full draft will be ready for you to review and adopt at the May meeting. One of the very important items I can't emphasize enough, and we have been emphasizing in the TAC meeting also, that FY 2024 implementation grant has already been opened. It has 3 different deadlines. For the implementation, the deadline is same day as the policy board meeting. However, that is still much better than what we were dreading earlier, because we thought it would be much earlier than that. What that means is that in the past, early this year, we were thinking that we will not be in a position to, in fact, apply for implementation grant this year. However, we can't be strong enough in emphasizing we can, and we must, and we should see as many implementation grants related to that as possible. Several of you have participated in the discussions about the projects in different cities. And so first set of meetings occurred with analysis of current data on crashes. Second series of meeting has started, by which we are identifying the exact intervention at exact locations for the corridor or intersections, so that we can have the projects. And we want to be able to help with the basic project estimates, and so that the implementation proposal can be submitted. In the implementation proposal, here's another very important point that most of us think of them as we have to have completed the design and engineering of the project. You do not. For the implementation project, all we need is some basic conceptual idea of what the project is going to be, what intervention we are proposing, and the design and engineering can be included as part of the project cost. And so from the staff, we really want to see as many implementation grant proposals go out as possible. This is a really important grant process that we have to start. We'll have it for 24, 25, and 26. And so make your priorities about which ones should you be proposing for this year. And let's not miss this one out at all. We have 3 years of submitting as many grants as we can, and we should do them as much as we can. Related to that, I also wanted to, so let me get to the FY 2023 first. So we also received 1.2 million federal funding to conduct 6 projects across Waco, Hewitt, and Belmead, which we are in the process of finalizing the grant agreement. So we should have that started in the next 3 months or so. Once we do that, you'll notice that it will have 2 stages. We'll have a design stage, and then we are going to have an implementation stage. In the implementation stage, we'll be doing some of the striping and some of the red lights or crosswalk related projects that we'll undertake. Lastly, and this is an important one. So based on the first round of discussions we had for FY 2024 at the MPO staff level, we had been considering if we should be applying for any further SS4A or not. There were 2 important items that came up. The one that seems very feasible has to do with signage inventory across McLennan County. So one of the important items that came out, half of our severe crashes and fatalities actually occur on the rural roads in McLennan County. Half of them occur in urban areas. And what came out was that in rural areas, quite especially on county roads or even on TxDOT right-of-ways, quite often the signage and such are problematic. And in most cases, County Engineer Zane Dunham, if you were here, I would have called on him to explain that, that we do not know where the signs are. We do not know what the reflectivity levels are. We do not know the conditions. We do not know when they're lost. We do not know when they're gone. And we don't even have the XY coordinates to figure out, even once we know that something is not there, where should we put them back? And so what we thought that it would be a good idea to apply for a supplemental planning grant that MPO could do. And with county, what we will do is that propose the project for the entire county. However, not all cities might need it. So for instance, City of Waco had conducted its own sign inventory several years ago. They already have a GIS layers and such. So it may be irrelevant, not applicable to them. In several other cities, Robinson also has some amount of work that's already done. However, what we wanted to do was, if the policy board is okay with it, we would like to go ahead and submit a sign inventory based, that's the idea. We make the supplemental planning proposal, and we will keep it optional for any city that wants to be included in that. We can simply include it and do the costing accordingly. So that's sort of, we want your thought on that. If you all are okay with it, we'll put it as a formal directive action item at the next meeting. But right now, if you all are okay with it, we can start working on that.
I mean, so even if individual cities have their own plan and system in place, if the MPO does it as a whole, I would just as soon include all of the entities that are in the MPO and then just keep it running. And so if anything has to change or does change, then we have a whole record as opposed to the individual.
So there's a practical problem there.
Okay.
And the practical problem is that MPO, we don't have the staff to maintain that database.
Okay.
And so our goal has to be that we complete the project and immediately transfer to the respective entities. And so, so in our conversation with the county, that is one of the things that Zane had pointed out, that he has had several discussions with all the county commissioners, that is an ongoing challenge. So that's one reason why the county engineer is very interested in maintaining that database for his area. How
the areas in the county don't have ETJ, I mean, that are not connected to the city.
Yeah, there are several. There are unincorporated areas.
That's not, yeah. So what do they do?
County will take care of that. Yes.
Whether they're in an ETJ of a adjacent city or not, right? If they're county but not in an incorporated city.
Do the cities have the staff available to do this?
City of Waco has conducted.
I know we do, but do the other cities, do they have the staff to maintain that database?
Some do, yes. And that's a collaboration because quite often it's not necessarily. So every city has some amount of personnel dedicated to street division. And it's somewhat of a static database, and in which you can update it whenever needed. And make this
GIS, some sort of
it'll be a GIS.
GIS or something like
Yes.
that, right?
Yes. So we feel pretty good about this idea of at least starting with the county, and then simply open it up for every city that wants to be part of that. So we can simply include whichever city would like to be included.
I agree.
I think it's great, but I'm like, I'm hearing what you're saying, Commissioner Jones, but if it's just, doing GIS, I don't understand what the level of difficulty it is to maintain for anybody.
No, it's not just a matter of what often happens is that you have to have crew members to repeatedly go and investigate and find out if it is still there. If the sign is gone, then you need to communicate with the person to update it. So that's the practical thing. So from the MPOs, we don't have the staff to find any of that information out.
And this would help us in what way?
So what this will do is, for instance, if just hypothetically you get a complaint from your precinct that I think there was a sign here. I don't know what happened.
We did that, yeah.
So what this GIS database will tell us exactly what the sign was, what that sign was, whether the sign was in good condition, bad condition, and you can immediately call for a replacement and have it installed in a relatively quick way. You don't have to go back into rethinking the entire sign, what needed to be. So it will speed up that process of replacement, and you would be able to respond much faster. And also, there's an accident, and you realize, oh, oops, there was a sign missing. You can immediately know what sign was missing, and you can replace it. You can also repeatedly even hire somebody to do a reflectometer analysis and saying that we already know, and all you need to do is update it and say that these signs are no longer reflective. These are very dark rural roads, and we need to make sure that they're replaced. So you can do them wholesale.
Dr. Kumar, will it address in those locations where there was never a sign?
We can update it accordingly, because since it's a safety related stuff, we can absolutely, so wherever there was no signage, we can still say that this is an appropriate placement.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've seen in a number of neighborhoods, that there are no signs.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like that in the unincorporated areas of McClellan County, there's essentially disproportionate amount of automobile crashes occurring. And if signs are a significant part of that factor, and this grant would be for the MPO, at least a good way to start this process of kind of sign mapping for those entities that don't have it. It seems like a natural, good fit for what we do and to go after that money, I guess. Do you need a?
No, there's no formal. I just wanted to get your thoughts. We can, and then as a staff, we can start working on it.
Is this the 24 grant or the?
Yes, this will be for this year. Yes. The deadline for the submission for the supplemental action grant will be slightly earlier than May meeting. So at the next meeting, we'll put this on your agenda as a formal visit. Yes.
All right, looks like our next agenda item.
One more quick item.
Yeah, I was like, I think he has one more.
Oh, I
one more.
apologize.
So for the 2023 RAISE grant, again, just to give you an update, we have been progressing with the cyber law clinic at Harvard Law with doing some of the analysis work. We are in discussion with Center for Transportation Research. We'll formally engage with them, and we will have that structure of research team and a steering committee team, and we'll keep you updated. It's a 3-year-long process that will happen. Probably one of the most exciting projects I've been part of. And so can't wait to give you more update as we make progress on that. So that's undergoing. And the very last disappointing result, that in FY 2023 SMART grant we applied, we did not get it. We learned that it was super competitive. 9% of the applicants got it. And in Texas, we only had one application that was funded. And I know for sure that there were at least more than a dozen and a half, about 16 to 18 projects were submitted from Texas, and only one received in Fort Worth. So that was disappointing, but we'll revise that proposal and submit it again in the next round.
As MPO chair, I don't think this is something that's worth asking you to surrender your badge or your gun on. I think we're good. You can keep going, apply for it next year. We can't win them all.
Mr. Chair, I was at, in DC this past week for National League of Cities, and I had a meeting with some of the staff from the Department of Transportation, and I appreciate staff for making sure that I had all the right input and the information, but it was a kind of a review of their processes in application, and especially for SS4A, you know, and so we walked kind of through that and what feedback was happening and what we had to offer for feedback. They were encouraging to continue for us to apply that from, you know, the applications that we put in, they were very good and sound. And so, you know, keep going. I said, yes, please, and thank you, give us more money. And, but it was a really positive meeting, I thought. So no surrendering of the gun and badge. We keep going.
That's right. Let's keep going. Thank you. And are we ready to move on to, I think we've got some more positive news though under MPO redesignation, which has been somewhat of a journey there with TxDOT and others, not Stan's TxDOT, but another maybe a little slower moving part of TxDOT.
So we submitted the supporting resolutions from the City of Waco, City of Hewitt, and the County Board of Supervisors. And at presently, the TPMP division of TxDOT is working with the legal counsel of TxDOT, preparing the request package to submit to the governor's office. They have not submitted. They will let us know when they submit it. And once they, then we'll wait for the governor's office to make the decision. And the next step related to that will be the next planning agreement, which current planning agreement has the expiration date of September 30th. And so TxDOT is most likely going to amend, extend that current agreement rather than writing a completely new one. So,
would that agreement be done in the newly designated MPO policy board name or under the old designation?
We are hoping that it happens prior to that. So yeah, that's our expectation.
If so, then it would be under the, instead of the City of Waco, it would be under MPO policy board.
Yes.
Okay. Or with MPO policy. Okay. And then then the next step for us locally after that would be to kind of launch a rebrand, rename effort to see how we want to proceed. If we want to continue to be named Waco MPO, if we want to continue to use our cool logo showing different modes of transportation, or something else, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions about the redesignation? For those kind of just joining that discussion, technically, the Waco MPO is not only is the City of Waco the fiscal agent, meaning kind of where it's housed and funded, but also the City of Waco essentially is the Waco Metropolitan Planning Organization. What this step does, just to kind of catch everybody up with it, if you're not there already, which most of you probably are, but what this does is put the actual legal entity Waco MPO in the policy board. So the policy board becomes the entity and not the City of Waco. Is that well stated? Okay. So anyway, that's that effort, which is an attempt to kind of make us, we're supposed to be the urbanized areas of McLennan County. It's kind of more of a regional transportation planning board, and hopefully that will help accomplish that objective. Okay.
In many ways, and I should add that, you know, we already do that.
We function that way.
Yeah, we function that way. We just want to make sure that our documents reflect that function.
That's good. All right. Next up, we have our update and discussion from the Technical Advisory Committee, TAC. Amy, do you have a presentation?
Very briefly, we all met on March 7th. We had a long discussion about the call for proposals framework and gave feedback to the MPO staff about it. We talked about the project selection criteria, and we received an update on the current status of grant activities, as you all just did. So basically, we're a little mini version of
Any questions from Amy or about the TAC? All right, thank you so much. All right. And then do we have any work group updates?
So the only one from the February 21st meeting, so you already had an update. Is there anything that Suzette, would you like to add from the bike ped work group meeting?
So we met on February 21st at Dewey Park. We had updates on the 2050 MTP and the grant programs, the SS4A, the SS4A2, and the race grant. We met with, we have heard from Tiffany Owens from Strong Towns, who they're seeking a conversation to form a group here. And we heard from Waco Walks, Waco Bike Club, Baylor, Mobilize Waco, and NCC. We had updates from all of those. And we heard from, we heard about the China Spring Park project. Parks and Rec was looking for input on their plan development. I think the next meeting is going to be May 15th, 2024. Locations to be determined.
Thank you. We also have a connected automated vehicle meeting coming up on April 17th, and this meeting is going to be important because we are trying to finalize a white paper for NEVI planning and for the charging infrastructure that we are expecting to fund in different parts of the county. Do you want me to jump straight into the?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's transition.
Okay. I just have a few updates that for the local fund, we have received it from most of the units. We're just waiting for the last minute from cities of McGregor and Waco. For the carbon reduction program, we have two of the projects that were funded for this year, the pedestrian project in McGregor and the tree planting project on Mars Drive in the city of Waco. We have to do a little bit of work about carbon sequestration calculations for the tree project, and we're trying to respond to it so that we can still go ahead and move these two projects forward. We also had a project from Waco Transit, which is still being decided upon by Federal Transit Administration. We're waiting for final decision from them. And the rest of the projects are in subsequent fiscal years, so Federal High Administration has sort of not given us any go-ahead yet. So we're waiting for that. One of the questions I had was based on some of the discussions and reflecting the demographic profile of this area, if policy board was comfortable with it. One of the things that we are requesting is that, and we have the capacity to do that, that for all of our public hearing, we can make the announcement in Spanish, and if anyone wants to address the policy board in Spanish, we can immediately interpret it for our consideration. And so if the policy board is okay with it, we would like to start announcing our public hearing announcements following the policy board chair's announcement in English. We'll follow that up with Spanish twice during the meeting, one at the beginning, one at the end, if you all are okay with it. And also, we would like to welcome two new policy board members. And so we have Jed Cole and Adam Neolet, if you both would like to say anything.
Either from your chair or with some kind of dramatic presentation.
Thank you all for having me.
Happy Eve.
Glad to have you all. Thanks so much for being here. And this can be a little bit of a lot of acronyms, you know, a lot of layers of bureaucracy. So there are no dumb questions in this room, or feel free to pull anybody aside if you have any questions about what we're doing or even what this is, you know, it can be a little complicated. So glad to have you all. I know that you'll both be
Like
great.
Jed, you're a repeat offender. You've been on board before, right?
I've come in replace of homes.
Okay. Yeah. Long time listener, first time caller. You know. All right.
West City of West. Yes.
And so, and of course, the policy board cannot serve properly. So Adam, you want to say anything? But I'm not sure if everybody knows you yet.
Is that about what you want? Just an introduction?
Yes.
Oh, history first. Hi, so Adam was brought in as the assistant city manager for City of Woodway back in mid-September. Currently the interim city manager the same city. So served 2 other cities prior to this one, and before that, had a background in law enforcement. So happy to be here in this part of Texas.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide. And obviously, the policy board can't happen, we have 2 new members, but we also have 2 members who have served the policy board faithfully and strongly in the past. And so we are very grateful and appreciative of work that both Ross Harris and Sean Oubre have done. And I think Sean's here.
Yes. Nice. Hey.
Where'd you get that mug shot?
Yeah. Is that in the post office?
So we're grateful for your service.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. All right. Well, without any other staff announcements, do we have any others? Okay. Our next meeting is Thursday, April 18th, 2024, 1:30 p.m. here at South Waco Community Center. Are there any agenda items to be considered? Any requests for adjournment? Okay, hearing none, are there any visitors registered or otherwise who would like to speak and address the policy board on any item not on the agenda? All right, hearing none, we will adjourn this meeting and the meeting of the Waco City Council call. Thank you all. Have a great
Yeah.